Well, did you tune into the last stream? Today I'm pretty much going to keep going with my stuff. If you caught the last one, I was kind of focusing on ZModeler, Nanomesh, ArrayMesh, which kind of want to keep going on with, but I'm kind of open to whatever. If you guys have questions or I want to show you guys some more stuff that I like to use with ArrayMesh and Nanomesh, especially for this project. If you're cool with that, but you got any requests, throw it out there because I'd love to, kind of free flow. That's always fun. Yeah, the ship for sure. So basically, I think around the last time I left off, roughly at this point. So I want to keep going with this, but I really want to get into laying out a bunch of stuff with ArrayMesh and Nanomesh, specifically this stream for setting up for Booleans, because all the block modeling stuff is fun and you can get a lot done, but the Booleans is where all those little details come from, and I found some pretty cool techniques with using those two features to automate a lot of this stuff to get some really cool details. So does that sound good to you? How's it going, Blands? Welcome, welcome. We got 22 people in here so far. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes just to let the stream kick on and let some people load in here. For you guys that are watching, one thing that I did after the last stream was I put together, I started a ZBC thread, which I was hoping would be a great place for all of us to collaborate with, all of you guys that might be tuning in or girls that might be tuning in regularly. I think I'll probably get through this whole thing. I want to get into rendering and, texturing and that kind of stuff towards the end. So maybe the next stream or two streams, depending on how much I can get done today. The last 2 hours flew by, as it always does when you're in ZBrush. But what's up, Enrique? Reclusive, you got a question. Going from live Boolean to a mesh and getting it so it's smooth enough for baking. Smooth as far as, what do you mean? Like you're making normals, maps, and that kind of stuff? Depending on, okay, so the Boolean generation, obviously you're not going to get a perfectly quadded mesh, right? It's going to triangulate certain parts and pieces, which you will be able to see once I go through some of my Boolean processes here. But as far as the edges, like, I'll be honest, it's not a secret, our map system and as far as that kind of stuff is different than everybody else. I don't want to say it's inferior. It's just there's a lot of breakup and process that you have to go through as far as baking those maps. So taking a pre-UV mesh with those live Booleans, you can pre-UV those and apply it still. But it's better to go through. I can go through and talk about that stuff towards the end once I have some actual Boolean meshes generated. But I would probably let me see. You got more comments. Yeah, the Boolean makes it sharp. So depending on, that's one thing I really want to get into is how to control the final outcome of that Boolean mesh. And with our stuff, depending on the kind of control that you want, if you don't want hard edges, I'm assuming you do want it super sharp or don't want it super sharp. You're saying you're turning off subdiv, making Boolean mesh, and then cleaning up the mesh and re-subdividing. What do you mean by re-subdividing? You're cleaning up the mesh and so you're dividing it post after you generate the Boolean? Okay, you don't want sharp. Okay, so I can go into that while we're just starting off. This is one thing that I have found really useful as far as generating that mesh, like deciding what to do. If I were to take let's just grab a piece here. We'll just take this guy. I'll clone it off. So I got this engine base, and then let's just go in here and I'm just going to duplicate this to generate a little piece. Okay, we'll just say this, for example. So I'm going to polygroup that guy. Let's make a quick little edge loop. Delete hidden. Let's go all polys. And do a little creasing here. Alright, so I got something in here. Let's go ahead and set this to subtract, set that to start. Alright, so you got live Boolean preview. Alright, so we got a little cut line here, right? And really where the control happens is a lot of times. I don't know if people, do you guys use creasing at all? Does anybody use creasing? Anybody that's tuning in? It's specifically you, reclusive. Because the creasing is really where that smoothing is going to happen. So if I go in and I take a look at this mesh, right now I just automatically turned on dynamic subdivision, but I'm just clicking D to turn it on and I'm getting this smooth factor. So the smooth obviously is controlled just by the slider, right? So the higher you go, the more you're going to smooth out that mesh, and you see you're going to get a different result. So if I take a look at that piece, this little subtractive piece, I went in and creased everything. So if I crease all these edge loops to keep these corners really tight. Alright, so I'm Shift D and D to smooth everything. So the smooth is dependent on the level of creasing that you have applied. So this piece I had pre-creasing set up, which I don't know if I went into this very much last stream, so it might be a good time to talk about it. But this crease level slider is a really important part of this. So normally this thing's set all the way to 15. So when I turn dynamic smoothing off and turn it back on, you'll see that with it on now, I can turn this on and off, I'm getting no change. So basically, what this means is at level 15, so these kind of go hand in hand together, creasing and dynamic subdivisions. The level 15 is essentially the subdivision level. So whatever level you have it set to, until it reaches that number of subdivisions, it's not going to smooth the mesh until it hits that point. And anything past the setting that you have, it's going to continue to smooth more. So you kind of have to find a good mix. I always find, like for example, I'll turn dynamic off. So I'm just clicking Shift D. And if you were to set this to say 3, let's see what we get. So I'll just type that in, click D. This is the level of smooth that we get. All right, so maybe I can, how can I fit this in here? Snapshot that. Okay, so you can kind of see it up there. So I'll hit Shift D to turn it off, and then if I were to go and change that to say 5 and click D, you'll see that it's getting a better result. So right now the most important part is where this smooth subdivision slider is now. So right now it's at 7. So if I go and take a look, we're at 5 in the crease settings. So if I were to set this to 5 and I hit Shift D and D, you see that we're getting no reaction because it's going up to 5. So they're both level right now. So if I were to go in and change this to say, or rather take the smooth subdivision slider, set it to say 6, you see that's going to start smoothing more. So until it hits 5, it smooths and it keeps going. So this is where the trick kind of lies, is what kind of edging do you want? The sooner you can start smoothing, the more soft edges you're going to get. So if I turn this off, go to my creasing and say set this to 2, and I'll maybe set my dynamic now to 4. I always like to do doubles. So double seems to work pretty well. I hit it to 4, and as soon as I start going above 4, it's going to start smoothing. But as you keep going, it's going to maintain certain edge quality better, right? So you'll see that at 4, you're getting this much resolution, and it's rounding out these edges. But I might want this to be a little cleaner with the same level of resolution, because you kind of have to think of dynamic subdivision still in your mind as a physical subdivision, you know, clicking Control D. It's still technically dividing the geometry, it's just not applying it. So this is where, okay, I'm at 4, 7 with my dynamic, so if I change this to 5, I want it to start smoothing later, so closer towards the higher resolutions. So going to 5, go up again, you'll see that edge is getting a little tighter. So if I keep going up to say 6 now, so there's only really between these two, we have 7 and 6. There's not that much distance between the two. If distance was a factor for that, maybe not. But you'll see that now we're getting a different result. So this is really where, what's really great about these two features with live Boolean is I can go through and variably control it. Obviously, as you're getting into higher levels at smooth subdivision slider 7, if I were to go in and actually make this mesh, so this is going to divide this mesh at the time of generating the Boolean. So with these settings applied, you would go into your external renderer, render Booleans, and you would go in and turn your dynamic subdivision option on. Sorry, I'm all backwards here. I'm thinking like beta versions of of Booleans. So in the subtool palette, you've got this dynamic subdivision option. So in this case, if you want to get cleaner edges, you need to use this option, and you need to control your creasing and your dynamic subdivision level. So again, we're at level 7, so that's 7 subdivisions to the mesh, so we'll make it, and you'll see once we finally generate this guy, where's our UMesh? Here we go. Alright, so this is where poly counts come in. I guess if you're baking maps, you're good to go. You can crank this thing all the way up and just bake the map and you're good, right? But you'll see that the density of this mesh, we're up to about 317,000, right? So depending on what you're doing, what you're going for, if you're baking maps, you're good. But if you need to reduce quality, this is where that level of control comes in. So, you know, you kind of have to consider how much, like how close are you going to be to this edge? How important is it to have that really smooth, or can you sacrifice polys? You know, if you're in the gaming world, poly count is kind of everything. You know, obviously now we're doing a lot better. You know, we can maintain higher polys, which makes ZBrush really awesome now in this, you know, in this day and age for designing, because you don't have to go back to that low poly topo nonsense as much. But still, you do have to control it. So in this case, this is where I'd go and say, okay, I don't want to do 7 subdivisions. I want to go down to more like 5, right? So 5, this is where I'm going to have to play around with this level. Maybe put this down to 4. Check this, or maybe let's try 3. Let's go give it a little smoothing. All right, so that, does it work for me? Kind of yes, kind of no. You know, I could play around with, you know, changing the base mesh and basically adding a physical edge loop to control it and a crease, right? So you get a little bit, you know, less polys, right? Because you're not going to be dividing across the entire crease, just this edge. So you could shortcut and, you know, put a couple edge loops there. Or I can go back, right, and I could change this to say 4. Like I don't want to do any creasing. Let's put it at 4. Right, so the smoothing's lower. So it's really going to depend. But at this level, if I generate this mesh, I got dynamic subdivision down here. I'm going to make the mesh. All right, so there's our 317. And oh, I don't know if it generated. Let's go back. Oh, I had solo on. Oops. All right, so I make this mesh. Right, now you're down to 21,000. Right, so from this distance, doesn't make that much of a difference. Right, but if you're going to be, if this is like a prominent part of your piece, which I'm going to get into doing Booleans on the main hull of the ship here in a little bit. So hopefully, does that, okay, you got questions, sorry. Just go on a tangent. Yeah, crease, 2 crease, 4 subdivision for softer edge. You were using 3, but was told that was too sharp. And your question was, so the edge where the Boolean subtracted touches the base mesh, that edge will always be super sharp. Yes, it's only where the meshes intersect. That's where you're going to get that level of control. So if I were to like illustrate this even more, right, you would say I go in here, and let's just grab like a little chunk here, like right in the middle of the mesh. I go inset region. Let's just move this out. Do some quick creasing. Oh, whoops, did not do symmetry. There we go. Alright, so let's crease the edge loop. Alright, so, oh, we gotta do this guy too. Alright, so depending on that level of smooth, you know, I can go all the way up to say 7 and I got that really nice soft edge. But I want to reduce that maybe. So I'm going to go in and change my creasing up to say 5 or 6. Right, and at 6, you're going to get a little bit more. So the trick is, that's lower numbers work better because you only have 7 smooth subdivisions. Hopefully in the future, maybe we'll be able to increase that amount, because a lot of it has to do with trying to average out what most people use on their computers and how many high poly or how high poly you can go. So we kind of have to find a good range. Going up too high, a lot of times people are just going to be crashing ZBrush, and that makes support a nightmare. So we try and keep it manageable and give you all those controls. Also, you could always go in and divide this thing afterwards as well. So you got a decent amount of range, but for this, you know, let's say like 5, so you get a little bit more smoothing, right? And then if I take a look at the preview, right, it's only where that intersection is happening. It's just at this edge. Anything that it doesn't touch, it's not going to affect that smooth. It's really dependent on that underlying geo. Okay, you got more questions. Wondering how you would make that soft when users. Yeah, so your workflow that works too. This is really the only option you have to control that edge, playing around with these two settings. If you can't get the look that you want, your next and only best step really is to do what you're doing, which is going in and subdividing it. So maybe not using dynamic, or maybe just taking that and doing manual edge loops just at those creases to get the exact thing that you want, and then it's going to come out in that way. So I might play around with trying to do creasing at a certain level and then going in and doing single edge loops. Like having creasing, but setting it at a low tolerance, and then going in and adding an edge loop, or maybe sliding this out if you don't want that crisp. So like space it out a little bit further. All right, so let that algorithm smooth it out a little bit less, and then go and reduce your creases. But yeah, sorry, I wish I had a better workflow for that, but that's really the only option you have. So physical subdivisions afterwards might be a better solution for you in that case. Yeah, and no worries. I tend to go on tangents all the time, so I can check myself. Okay, so let's go in and let's get cruising here. For anybody, all you new people that have joined, I just want to say welcome. Before I get started, let me turn off live Boolean and get my final thing set up here. All right, so the last stream, if for any repeat viewers, if you guys checked out the last stream, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate that. And I kind of left off somewhere here in the back of this engine. I'm working on just building a concept spaceship, doing a lot of ZModeler, Nanomesh, and ArrayMesh is what we talked about last month, and we'll be doing a lot of that this month too. But I want to get into live Booleans. But I decided to break up the sections here, because I don't know about you guys, I get a little crazy with subtools, and especially with Booleans now, there's so many chains going on. I decided to break these up into 4 separate sections. So I got the middle, the main hull, body, and then the bridge. All right, so the bridge is kind of what I want to focus on today to start getting into some more fun stuff and detailing. So if any of you guys have questions, want me to reiterate on something or show you guys again from last week, I'm going to do my best to kind of illustrate all of it. But I wanted to let everybody know that I decided to put together a ZBC thread for this stream because I thought it'd be a great opportunity to collaborate, and if you guys want to post images or you have questions, there's a couple people that commented here that were looking for a PDF that I was talking about last stream, which is I made a watch using ArrayMesh and stuff. So I will post that. I promise. I'm sorry that's taken me so long. But if you guys want to follow me on ZBC and post your work here in this thread, that would be awesome. I would love to collaborate and go back and forth with you guys and answer more questions in depthly if I need to. So you can find me at Sir Scallywag, and actually I think I'm going to post this thread in the chain or in the chat. Alright, so I got that out of the way. I'm going to start cruising, and let's take a look at this back engine. So this is looking pretty good for me for now. I think I want to start focusing on the Boolean stuff, so I'm going to kick up to the bridge here. And then, so at this stage, I'm keeping everything really low poly. I'm going to try and block out all the base primary shapes, so I think I have everything done. So now it's about time to go in and start dumping in all these details and things. And if you guys were tuned into the last stream, a lot of what I was doing was taking, I came up with this little workflow where I've got just a bunch of like solo parts that I pre-model, or it gives me some sort of starting point instead of just starting with a block or a cube, which sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But at least I have both options. But, I like to go in and use the expose feature in X and Y to kind of give me this little menu, right? So it gives me the option to go through and just select a part and turn it into an insert mesh. And one thing that I kind of touched on last week that I'm going to take a little bit further right now is starting to lay out some base foundational details in areas where you have a lot of like greeble, nerdy kind of detail. So I'm going to go in, do my insert mesh. This was the workflow from last stream. Creating an insert mesh and then creating a Nanomesh brush, which is applying it to ZModeler. And then now I can go in and take a look at the parts that I want to start laying out some details to. So Oh, I'm just checking on the chat. Sorry, guys. Pro 4210. We emailed about multiple edge loops. Yeah, sorry about that. I we had a whole conversation about that, and turns out the some of the verts aren't welding with the certain features in ZModeler Brush. Insert multiple edge loops as one. There are a few others. That is one that we are looking into, and we apologize for the delay in fixing that. But there's a lot of underlying things that those are connected to, so we're going to take a little bit more time to finalize that, among other things, because if we fix that, we're going to have to make sure we pair it for everything. But quick fix for those issues. The weld points is super easy. That's one of the things that I keep. Anytime I go in, what he's referring to is if you say go in and do insert multiple edge loops, adding them across with the interactive option. Sometimes when you smooth, these won't completely weld. You might get some holes. So my shortcut is, I have my menus, which I need to upload this to the ZVC if you guys do want to use it. It's just, I have my primary tools locked into the 2 key. So then I have my menus, and I keep weld points here. So I always just kind of go in and just, if you have a couple welded verts that aren't working, I just run that, and almost always that just does it automatically. So I know it's one more extra step, which we always hate, but it's not too bad. But yeah, I promise we'll fix that as soon as possible. Alright, so I got my Nanomesh stuff, and I'm just going to go in, and this workflow works best if I like to break things up. I don't like to apply it globally. It gives me more control over the randomness. So in this case, I want to just start to lay in some foundational details under the frame here in this middle. So, this is basically the ship. You got the bridge or the main cockpit, where all the pilots and everybody sit, and then these are all large main pieces. So I really want to go in and start controlling the scale, these kinds of details. So I took this little piece, and I usually like to go in and just take the major sections and then assign some quick polygroups. So for me, Control-Shift-L is mapped to auto group, which is super easy. You can always go into polygroup, auto group, and group by normals is another one to use a ton, right? But just assigning separate polygroups to these areas. Now I'm going to go in and just do the polygroup all feature. Oh, let's make sure this, did not want to do it. Let's try that again. Alright, so I got this guy, that's solo, I think. Yeah. No floor grid. You guys, has everybody made the upgrade to P2 yet? If you have, how's it been going? Any other issues outside of the ZModeler stuff that Pro 420 mentioned? We've been trying to narrow down all the little quirks and things that, get left under the cracks sometimes or are too difficult to fix. For me, it's been working really well. I run Windows side. I use Mac mainly just for support, but I try my best to bounce around on both platforms as much as I can. But honestly, I can't get over the option key, command key transition. I need to get a Windows keyboard for that. I'm lazy. So this workflow that I'm kind of doing is I'm working out how to go in and apply these details really quickly. So I'm applying just a Nanomesh to a polygroup here. And this is where that random distribution really comes into play. I took a thing that has some detail in it, which I like to do. Doing with the cube, we did that in the last stream to get just some basic paneling, which is really awesome. But now I really want to get in, I'm thinking about rendering as far as lights hitting edges and really getting areas that don't, look flat or fall short, So I want to really, add as much detail as possible. So doing that initial piece with even just a little bevel makes a big difference. But, I like to go in, and this is that workflow that I've kind of figured out is, this is stuff you just don't want to do. You might have to do it with texturing, but I can do all this stuff really quickly just by randomly distributing it with the slider. And then now I can go in and we can change our alignment. So for me at this point, it's all about randomness. So I'm going to align to random edge to give it the maximum amount of random effects we can do. But then now we can go in and play around with the variations. So for me, I don't want to do too much depth. I kind of want to control it this time with the depth. I mean, we have width, length, and height. So the height's going to play around with how much that's pushing out in z-space or whatever axis is unified to this. But you know, we can change the variation to get this leveling like so, which I might do at the end. But at this stage, I kind of want to keep it nice and clean, and I'm just going to go in and edit this mesh. So I'm just soloing this guy out. So then using ZModeler, go in with my Q mesh and just start selecting some parts here. So I always kind of, anytime I'm going to make additions, I like to do a little bit of push, a little bit of pull. So maybe do a little bit of inset here, grab this guy, go back to my Q mesh. Right, if I wanted to, I could maybe let's grab another one, inset this way. Now we could hue mesh the poly loop to kind of give it just a little edge there. You know, we could play around with creases and all that stuff like I was mentioning at the early stage. You know, I could go in and apply my group by normals, crease poly groups, you know, and then fix any additional ones. It depends, you know, like for this thing I don't necessarily need to smoothen out. Smoothing, eventually if it's a smooth preview, if it looks good, I'm going to have to generate it, right? If it has any dynamic subdivisions applied. But, you know, for this, it's just really minute stuff. So, you know, I probably won't smooth it. So I'm just going in and adding a little detail there. And then now let's grab another part. And let's bring this guy out maybe. Alright, so I'm just adding just some blocky details. Alright, so then it really starts to break it up, and it's just, I'm thinking like, okay, what's this going to look like? I'm going to have some stuff sitting on top of it, some major panels with lights and all kinds of things, but this is kind of like the underlying backdrop of the detail of this bridge. Alright, so just doing a few things, you can see it gives you all kinds of additional details that, you know, happen pretty quickly. So, you know, this is where I go, and now I got some base stuff in there, and let's play around with variation. So I just want to do width and height to get a little bit more random panels. So I usually start with, you know, go with values of 10, you know, with width and length just to play around with that. And then now, because I want to isolate this per angle, you know, because this thing has a lot of like choppy edges there. So this is where I can go in and use the clip feature. So the clip, if you turn this on, you'll see that it's clipping it around the polygroup border. So wherever you see that polygroup border, it's going to lock that in, which is really awesome, right? So I can continue to populate more. I could do random distribution to get this kind of stuff, and then continue to go back and edit, which I kind of like that. It's very Star Wars-y. Right, so I can now, great thing about this is I could copy this, right, and I could go in. So I'm copying just the randomization, the variation sliders. And then let's go in here, go back to our insert nano. Do I have symmetry on? What's happening with these polygroups? It just doesn't want to keep. There we go. When in doubt, Control W. Alright, so I got this now, and I can go in. Oh, I need to redo my, or actually, so I don't know if you guys use this, if any of you guys have tried this before, you know, when you create a Nanomesh brush from the insert mesh brush, it creates a separate ZModeler brush. You'll see there's a little one. So I always kind of keep track. I don't like my brushes getting too cluttered, you know, so I could maybe select this, go into my brush palette and restore configuration to get rid of everything. So as long as this one's selected, you know, I could remove everything else and just keep it clean, right? Which drops it out of that quick pick menu too. So you'll see it's still here at the bottom, but I always kind of go to the quick pick just to keep it easy. And Oh, we got Kingsley up in here. So let's keep going. I'm going to keep applying this. So I copied that previous setting. I can always go back and cycle through, copy these settings, paste them here, right? So I'm getting the same settings, but maybe this one, you know, I want to go through and maybe put this one to 10, put this one to 20. Let's go 25. And then let's go and edit this. So I'm going to make this a little bit different and just try and keep that uniqueness to each piece. Maybe take this. Alright, and I can easily go in and maybe just do some edge lipping. So if I want to do like a little bevel, sweet. Okay. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Whoa, too much vertical. Alright, so let's see, what can we do here? I could play around with, and I can always go back and undo those. You know, I can undo any, you know, all these basic stuff, or maybe just go in and modify some of these. If I want to just maybe get rid of, say, this one. Maybe I'll do like a little connection here. See how that looks. Right. So if the vertical stuff doesn't work, you know, we can always go and play around with this. So if you want this to be more, less vertical, maybe shrink this down. Make the size smaller or bigger. Right, could even reduce the randomness if that's not working for me. You can play around with that stuff. There's one piece that I just don't like. I think it's, let's see, it's that one right here. There we go, it's a little better. Right, so then if needed, you know, this is where that height might come into play if I want to get this to overlap a little bit more. That's pretty cool. I dig. Alright, so a little different than the last one. I might actually shrink this a tiny bit. There we go. Alright, so you can either generate it. You know, I like to work on one side. I could have polygrouped everything and worked on two sides, but I don't know, I think it's just my abstract brain. I always kind of focus on the left, which I think I mentioned in the last stream. But, you know, for this one, I'm just going to go and get the front. And let's start, you know, I could even go in, try a different piece, you know. The more unique pieces you can start with, the better it's going to be. So I could maybe take, let's see, what's a good one. We got just a plain, we could start from scratch. We could take this guy. Let's try, I want something that's square, like, I think I can work with this. Let's turn those nanos off. Make sure this guy's groups. There we go. So I always kind of check my rotation, make sure that's 0. So this one I don't want to have any angles. I kind of want to keep everything sort of unified with this 90-degree angles, that kind of stuff. It is very Star Wars-y. I'm realizing that this piece is turning out to be that way. But I'm cool with that. Oh, and then last, I want to make sure I got my clip on. Yep. So then let's go rinse and repeat. Maybe a few more of these guys. I'm also thinking about poly count, you know, because each one of these nanos, depending on that start piece, it's also a good reason to keep this thing very low poly as much as you can if you're going to use Nanomesh in this way, you know, because, you know, we're spoiled in ZBrush. We just kind of go and go and go, but then it's like, you know, I gotta do maps or, you know, export it out to somewhere else. So that's why I just stay in ZBrush. Alright, so I got my, everything's pretty much lined up. I can check my fit options. You know, you can play around with these as well to see if you get a better result, or, you know, something that you didn't really think of before. Proportional is usually a good way to go. Fit is just fitting it per poly, but that's if you want to match it to the exact poly of each geo, you know, if you wanted to do sort of like a micro mesh kind of thing. But this works pretty well for me, just using proportional. Alright, so one more little modification here. So for this guy, you know, I could go in, say, connect this one. You know, we could maybe do a little mirror and welding. That's always a good one for me. I like to mirror and weld just to kind of get different effects. You know, I could go in and maybe I keep my mirror in deformation. That's a big one. Flip this in X, mirror and weld in X. Let's see, what do I want to do? See what that looks like. And actually, I might do one more little extrusion here. Alright, cool. Not too bad. Alright, so I won't waste your guys' time while I fiddle with this. I don't know about you, but I obsess over this kind of stuff. I probably spend way too much time thinking about it. Yeah, blends. Could do a macro for that. Yes, absolutely. Macros are key, right? They help a ton with all kinds of things. I think for this workflow, I'll probably go through and build some macros for this, because I could see myself doing this over and over and over for all kinds of things, which I always try and like, I mean, for me, because I teach, I even using this custom UI is not great for me, because I usually go with standard default, everything's default. So macros is not something I'd use outside of work, but it's definitely a good idea. Alright, so I got enough stuff here. Oh, let me get one more guy. This guy. I'll do this one really quick. One thing I always like to do is, if I gotta flatten something, I don't know, the old traditional way is like, select it, you know, use the gizmo or whatever, but I always like to maybe just go and use a clip curve really quick. That kind of speeds things up. And then also, just less switching. You know, a lot of times I like to keep that as my primary control shift option. Sometimes I'll go back to select rectangle, but you can, I don't know if you guys know this, but using clip curve, as you draw a curve out, if you let go of control shift, you can then tap the control key, which switches to the selection. and you can do Control Alt too, right? So letting go, you can kind of swap back and forth between these, which is a pretty cool feature, but depends on how savvy you are with all those things. All right, so we got some randomness, or we need some randomness. And then let's do some random height variation. Alright, so I can maybe go around and check my order to see if it gives me something a little bit more interesting. But we'll say that's good. Alright, so each one's a little bit unique, which works and doesn't work. I'm okay with that for now. I'm going to cover it up with a lot of stuff, so it might actually end up being more beneficial. We'll find out at the end. So now, you can leave this stuff in preview. I don't suggest it though, especially if you have if you're popping in a lot of nanos and a lot of pieces. The more you build up on that, the more complex your project gets, and it could get complicated if you wait to generate your nanos at the end. So I'll save out a tool like this, for example. It's also a good reason why good thing that I separated out my major sections, because I could go in and save this as its own section, right? So I just want to keep the previews, to keep those settings, and come back to it. So that's one option, because it's not, there crashes can occur in those situations. You got to figure you're populating a few 100,000 polys at least for each section that I just did. So word to the wise. So I'll just go in and generate these guys. So clicking one to mesh, and then now let's grab, see, we want this. So easy way to get everything, I'm just going to Control Shift A, and I'll do split hidden. Alright, so now I've got those nanos. And I don't know if you guys, if you have upgraded to P2, new update that we've had with the trays, which is a small thing but kind of a big thing, at least for me. Muscle memory kicks in, and it used to be click once, now it's click twice for the trays, which has taken me a little bit of getting used to that one for sure, but I'm getting there. So this one, I want to separate these nano parts just to solo them out. If I want to clean them up or remove some, I could do Nanomesh, greebling. So I'll put a value, and let's go in and let's just separate them. It would have been good to generate them and split first, but hey. There we go. Alright, so I got this as one. So I'll go in and split hidden. Grab this one. Split hidden. One. This one we're going to do 2. So I'm just grabbing most of it that I can see, and then anything that's left over I just do Control Shift A to grow out to the shell, which usually works pretty well in this case because they're not too small. I'm able to isolate that out pretty well. And then let's split hidden. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to go in and do a little mirror and welding. Cool. Alright, so I got some base details. So now, I'm going to go in and start adding some more parts and pieces here eventually, but I think that's looking good. It's at least satisfying my need to see some kind of progression with it. So I think I can move on. So now I think this is a good time to start going into doing some live Booleans. And I think for this, I'm going to do a lot of repeat parts, a lot of, little areas where, little grooves cutting in or extrusions. And in this case, it depends. Like, I could go in and take any one of these pieces again and start with these, but I kind of want to start small at this point and just getting the basic cuts and grooves going, and then I'll work up to these, more fine-tuned details. Let me check the chat. Um, so I've been smashing the tray. What does that mean? Um, like when I'm opening it, am I clicking loud? I think I do. I got a heavy finger. I definitely click loud now that I say that out loud. Maybe you mean like opening and closing, which is absolutely true. I don't like having it open. I think I just feel obligated to go and show you guys stuff. But that's kind of the goal with these menus, is to reduce the amount of stuff. Eventually I'd like to do this, but I still use a lot of these tools, and I don't want to cram all those into a menu. So I'll try and keep it locked to this view. Got to get checked on those things every once in a while. So where to start? In this case, I kind of want to stick to the cubes, 90-degree angles. Easy way to kind of go through this process is, first I would say, I got my nano greebles, all that stuff is there. Anything that's repeatable, I don't know if you guys have gotten used to these things yet, but using the chains, I can shift click to turn everything off. And as long as I don't have any of the selected arrow subtools selected, I can hit the eyeball for that one and just turn on everything below it. So I kind of use that as a way to group things. So for the bridge parts, these major cockpit areas, I'd probably go through and set that as a chain, right? So I could go in and turn this on, right? So I get those guys and so on. So let's work on just this guy. Now I want to start doing some Booleans, so I need to set some things up here. We're going to turn those off and just work on the bridge. So this is where I go in and figure out, what's my starting base mesh? Do I want to start with a cube? Do I want to start with a pre-built piece? In this case, for me, cube is the best way to go. So if I take the star, I like to start super low poly. So I'd go to a cube with no subdivisions. And let's bring this in. So I'm going to insert this guy. And I'll call this Boolean cube 0. Alright, so that's going to be my starting cube. And then let's make a bunch of them. So I'm going to go through down the list and use each one maybe to start blocking out different parts. Alright, here we go. No menus, no tray. Oh, you're smashing the tray, Reclusive. Oh, and there's something I wanted to say to you guys. I'll remember in a second. Alright, so I'm going to bring this up here, and I got some reference images up. I'm kind of cycling through like all kinds of stuff, different, just hard surface panels. Maybe I want to do some ArrayMesh with wheels, which I want to get into doing some cylindrical stuff to kind of highlight how I worked with the watch. But for now, I was just trying to get these panels and grooves going. So let's see. The first one I probably want to do is maybe go in, start working on the wing here. And let's go to the regular ZModeler brush. I'm going to restore this. So I just got my basic stuff here. Does anybody use the, like using the move feature? Alright, you just want to move stuff, move things around. There's pretty much every possible option to transform and move stuff around with ZModeler, but for me, I end up going to it for the basic stuff, insert edge loops, QMesh, bridging, that kind of stuff. So I always kind of keep the poly action either to QMesh or inset. And then for moving, I'm just kind of adding to the tool set using the mask pen to rectangular, isolate a thing out and just move stuff. That way I don't have to change my settings too much, because I don't like to go spacebar, spacebar, spacebar all the time. So I always kind of do that, which is a pretty old school way of doing it, I guess, but old tricks, I guess. Alright, so I'm going to make some kind of little groove or panel in here. Alright, so now let's say I want to do like a little beveled extrusion down here. I could move these guys. In this case, that's where move really comes into play. If you want to do specific polys that might be a pain, because I got an angle here, I can't really, well, I guess I can select that pretty well. But works for now. So Control Shift L, do my creasing real quick. Alright. Alright, so I'm going to crease this edge. So going back to that crease stuff, this is where it plays a big part, with your Booleans especially. So I'll turn on live Boolean, make sure I got my stuff set up. So this is the first one in the chain. So I'm going to first go in and maybe continue that to the back. Alright, so that edge there, Shift-D, smoothing right now by default, I don't, because it's a new project, this should be set, creasing is at 15, yeah. Alright, so, if I want that to be a perfectly crisp edge, 15, good to go. It'll never smooth it out. You'll never go above 7. Right, so even if I go all the way up, it's doing nothing. But if I do want to get a little bit of smooth in there, maybe set this to 2 and 4 works, 3 and 6. So we can do level 2, dynamic, level 4. So turn it off, turn it on, and we'll see what it looks like as we keep going up. So if it's too smooth, which I think it is, let's try 3. Getting closer. Yeah, we'll leave that. Alright, and then in this case, turning on polyframe, I can see where that intersection is happening. So I just want to do that little 45-degree angle. So I might even take this and go up just a little bit more. So going down, you might get a little lip there. That's not too bad. No, I'll leave it like this to keep that clean. Alright. So now, one more thing I might want to do is, I don't like when you get a perfectly flat edge there, so let's see, what can I do? Maybe take this, Alt-click, just to angle that one too. Oh, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I think I need to add an edge loop in there. That's what I'm missing. Okay. So let's see. I go in here. Let's delete this guy. Old school method, delete, manually stitch it together. guys. Make sure I crease those edges. So I'm going to smooth it a little. So I want to make sure I hold those creases. There we go. Alright, so what was I doing? Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. I just want to take this lip, go that way. And give it a little more room. There we go, cool. Alright, so now this is where, you know, the ArrayMesh stuff is going to get really fun. This is kind of stuff I wanted to introduce to you guys if you haven't used it. So I got a part here, right? And it's a very simple piece, right? But I want to start dumping in more details, as many grooves and cut lines, repeatable stuff. So I got the base cube 0. So this is where I take, anytime I'm using a Boolean piece, I like to take parts and then extract other parts from them. So I have the 0, I could just duplicate this, and I'll just keep these consistent. So I'll go 0, array, setup. Alright, so this one, I just want to create a little, just a tiny little groove. So I can go in here and just dump in a couple edge loops here. Right, because I want to isolate, let's do one here too. So I'm going to polygroup this first. Right, so I got a little cut line. I want to put one in the edge. One little trick, I don't know if you guys, if you use the Control Shift to select polys, it's a really good idea, especially with polygroups too. Anytime you want to select something, it's best when you have a point instead of just a flat poly. So this is why I always like to go in and put insert edge loop, so I have a little cross, so I have a point to click on, which gives you the option to say you needed to manually orient your gizmo to something. This gives you a point of orientation to say alt click and then drag to line things up. If, for example, you can't get it to do it automatically, right? Like depending on how hard you click, or you know, if you're heavy-handed like me, like see, it's not perfect, right? If I just tap, most likely it should do it, but it's always hard to say. So it makes it a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit easier for me, at least, to free flow and not have to like get wrapped up in that kind of stuff too much. So I'm gonna polygroup this guy, grab this, delete hidden. Alright, so we got this little piece here, and I want to start to do some arrays for this. So we can go in QMesh all polys. Let's crease these corners. For this one, I'm going to keep this nice and tidy. So I'm going to go to my creases, level 5. You know what, I might not even use dynamic for this. I don't think I need to. Alright, so now I got this piece. You know, I can alt click to center this, make sure it's oriented, play around with the thickness. But now I want to go in and I'm going to start building on top of these Booleans. So I got, so far, this is where we're at. And now we have this array piece ready to go. So I'm going to take this, and depending on the level of intersection on the mesh, right, it's going to play a part into where you get this preview. Right, so if it's too far in or if it's not intersecting properly, you're going to get those display errors. So you got to be careful about how it's sitting. It has to be an exterior part leaving the surface. If it's all jammed in, then you're not going to get a perfect result every time. So I got this little cut line, and I'll go into my arrays. So this is my bread and butter workflow for all the basic stuff. It works for all kinds of things. Basically going in, taking a piece, I want to lock the position and the size just to keep everything oriented where it is for now. And anytime you're doing repeat parts, make sure you set your settings. I might just start with, say, 15 repeatable pieces. And then let's go in, and I don't like to use sliders. I don't know, but how do you guys feel about the transpose tool? Because it's one of my favorite tools ever in ZBrush, but I think it's also one of the hardest to learn. But this transpose option, I can go in, press W to isolate my gizmo, but if I turn this off, this gives me the transpose tool, right, which is oriented to the mesh. that perfect center. And then I can go in and just manually bring this out like so. Maybe bring it to this point here. Right, so I got a good repeatable section here, and then I could go in and maybe change the amount. Right, so this is what's really awesome about this is I could make these smaller, make it shorter. Right, I can change the amount variably. So it's kind of going back to the first stream is, save yourself the time, just take one piece and you can change and variably control all of these things without having to, say for example, take this piece here, right, and using the insert multi edge loop feature, for example, that would be great. I could go in and turn on interactive and add all these edge loops and then go in and Qmesh the polygroups, right? So I could take just the polygroups to extrude Qmesh polygroup all, right? So I could do it like this, but that's kind of locked in. That's going to be really hard. Say I don't save undo history. My files end up getting way too big and it's too much to manage. So I don't have backups outside of previous iterations or saves, but if you forget, that's one thing that you'd have to rebuild really quick, and it's just extra time that isn't necessary. Not to mention what this will present to me with the creasing options too. So if I wanted to play around with the creasing, I can do that, and it gives me all these controls that I can change on the fly before I make my final decision. But I can change those repeat parts like so. Let's select that one. Right, and what's also really cool is the original piece. Right now I click W to toggle back and forth to Gizmo and transpose because they're locked. But I could switch back to Gizmo and I can go in and maybe change the width of these things. So if I wanted to be a little bit thinner, right, I can do that. I can change the position. So it's just the first piece and everything else is oriented to that first piece. So really, really fun, and I find all kinds of things I use this for. And in this example, I could go in and maybe, let's take a look at, let's do some edge loops. We'll do multiple, I'm going to do specific, let's do 8. Now, you could turn ArrayMesh off if you want to just look at the solo piece. Either way, whatever floats your boat. So I can do there and there. And now let's go in here and do a little Qmesh polygroup. Yeah, or no, I want to do a single. I'm going to do these guys. There we go. Alright, so crazy fast details, right? And I got just a little extra group. It's just, from far away, it might not make that much of a difference, but, all the options that you have, to pretty much modify and tweak all this stuff on the fly. So then I might just leave this for now, or maybe go in and repeat some other parts over there, but let's keep going. Alright, and I do want to see, kind of want to keep everything in reference that's in this major area here. Yeah, okay. Alright, let's see. So, another one. So I got all these cubes. I kind of made my backup cubes, so I'll go to cube 1 now. Let's bring this up here. I want to make sure you guys have questions. Oh yeah, my transpose question. Dougie says, it took you a long time to get used to the transpose tools. Finally clicked and you love them. See, I think it's always when it clicks, it's different for everybody, and I think it's just how much you use it, because it is super intuitive. Like, I mean, gosh, you can, as far as posing goes, like, do you guys, let me draw this thing out. Like, if you have a character, like, transpose could even be used as a way to, like, sculpting. Like, I use it for posing all the time. You draw, transpose out like so. You can stretch things out, and depending on the position of where things are, with the move option, you can hold Alt and you can click to toggle this in between, which I always love for, like, you doing a character sculpt. You can do the elbows, or you want to go in and maybe just, if I undo that with scale, you can hold Alt in the middle and you can inflate those center pieces. There's all these secondary controls that go for miles for me, and I still, to this day, I love the Gizmo for this kind of stuff, but for organic sculpture, transposing, that kind of stuff, it always transpose, because it's like a joint. You can take a character, and put the starting point at the shoulder, put one point at the elbow. Like if you have a, sorry, I'm going on tangents already. Wait, cancel. I don't want a project. I want a tool. I want to solo this, right? So let's say you want to do like you got start from the shoulder all the way down to the wrist. As long as you keep this thing centered, right? I could go in, mask that guy off, do a little blur, right? I could do a rotation like so, or I could put this up here at the elbow with rotate, holding Alt. I can rotate the elbow, right? So it works kind of like that joint system, right? And you can place this wherever you want and then rotate along that pivot in the center here. If I were to put this like in the middle of the arm, just between this area, I can rotate this like so. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Anyways, you guys probably already know about that. I just geek out about that stuff. Okay, so let's keep going. I got to get some quality details in here. Alright, so I want to start to get a little bit more. Let's do some grooves up in here. Alright, so maybe do like a little trough or some kind of vent, maybe, kind of keeping with the repeatable shapes, going with that. So set this to subtract. And let's go in and do multiple, say 2, and do a little elevation on this. Probably not that much. Say 15 elevation. Whoa, more like 1. It's too much interactive. Yeah, that'll work. Go. Forgot about the mask. Alright, let's see. What am I going for here? Alright, so again, I can take this guy. Let's go in, duplicate that one. So that's weird. Oh, I don't think I have double turned on probably. So hey, this would be another, you know what, I don't know if I have this macro. I had one for I don't know if it's loaded. Or you know what, we can use the defaults. I just want to go in and turn on double side for everything, so I can go to Subtool Master. We can do visible, turn on double-sided. That's always a good thing to do when you start, especially in a case like this when you got a ton of subtools, and I always prefer double on more than off, but I guess that's just me, I don't know. Okay, let's try that again. Delete hidden. I think what I want to do, I want to repair this a little bit. So I want to make sure all this stuff is even. I should have done that with the first part, but it's actually pretty easy. This is where that, you know, masking certain parts off, so I might grab the, tidy this up a little bit, keep it nice and flat. Bring this out to here like so. Cool. So let's do a quick edge loop here. So I'm going to do a little extrusion this way. And let's auto group these guys. Cut that in. So that way I'm just getting a little bit of intersection there. Set this to subtract. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to do another quick array for this. Go with transpose. That's okay. I might scale that. With this thing, it's tough because it's so, the scale factor is a big part, right? Because all the details, I want to make sure that they're all small enough and not, so it doesn't appear like a miniature or a toy, you know? So we can maybe just do more. And shrink it just a bit. There we go. That'll work. So, didn't you guys watch? You guys watch our other streams from other Pixel people? Anybody watch Paul's stream a couple days ago? If you did, there's a somebody made a meme of this dude. They made a cologne for Paul, which I thought was hilarious, and gave him like Fabio hair. Alright, I'm going to keep this, I'll keep this as is for now. I'm going to keep that in preview. I'm going to start doing some larger pieces for this. So switch back to my Gizmo. Alright, what would be next? I think I want to start doing some subtractive. So I'm going to do all Booleans, at least for my sort of subtractive pieces. Anywhere you have edges or different levels, so I'm going to keep that consistent with Booleans. So this is where the basic cube's going to help, because I can kind of start small and work my way up pretty quickly. Let's see, what am I going for here? Subtract. Okay, so maybe I want to do like some kind of little, let's see, maybe bring this back just a smidge. And then also, you know, this thing's got, it's got a little bit of stepping, and it's not perfectly flat, so I'm gonna have to be careful with how I deal with this. But I might make sure this has no, okay. Alright, so now maybe go and just put this in a little bit more. Alright, so then for this guy, I just want it to be a little subtle edge there. But, you know, this is where, again, that smoothing is going to come into play, because I want to keep some of these edges, so I'm going to crease edge loops at all these hard edges. I can try my group by normals thing, see if I can shortcut a few of them. which that works pretty well. Alright, cool. So I want this sort of trough or whatever, this little vent that's going down. I'm going to move this one up. And then let's take this guy. Alright, so if you guys haven't used the transpose option with the Gizmo, is actually pretty handy for this kind of stuff. I just want to work on these two parts here. Let's turn off live Boolean really quick. So just turning the transpose chain on. Could solo this, refresh the orientation, Control-Shift-Click the first subtractive and then the next subtractive parts, and then just push this in a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's going. And then just simply click it to turn it off, or you can Control-Shift-Drag to bring that out. So it's kind of pushing that in there a little bit more. Alright, now Reclusive, you got some work? Yeah, it's somebody you got it. Introduce increase by Paul Gamery, which is so funny. I love it. Yeah, there you go. That's the image. If you guys haven't seen this, oh, I love it. Savage. You guys are savage. I think somebody like literally put it together in about 2 seconds. Dougie, yeah, thanks for tuning in, man. Of course, I'll yeah, check out the check out the ZVC thread, sir_set scallywag. You can post stuff there if you have questions or want some feedback bouncing back and forth. That'd be cool. But hopefully I'll see you next time. Oh, Reclusive, you made it? That's so funny. Good work. I gotta give you a golf clap for giving Paul a hard time. That's hilarious. Alright, so let's see. I'm gonna do some quick insetting. Alright, so I might go in and do a little move trick here, just to get some edges in that. And then let's take a look at this. So I want to get just a little border. So maybe let's do a single edge loop. Q-mesh these poly loops. Yeah, there we go. And then we could even just take these guys little bit. I'm just going to work on this guy. And that's interesting. Let's give that a try. Alright, so I got a little artifact in there. Just want to make sure everything's in properly. It's most likely an edge. Yep, okay, so here's, if you smooth, you can see, if you take a look at this, if you get these, ever get these live Boolean sort of erratics, or it looks like a screen error, it's just some of the creasing isn't holding, so the mesh is smoothing in a weird way, so the display's a little off. So it's pretty much this edge right here. That one's got to be creased. These corners just they weren't holding from the auto grip. Cool. Mirror welded X. Alright, so now I want to start getting into like maybe these turret pieces here. So I might want to, let me just do this one piece really quick. Alright, so I want to get like a little sort of rounded out cylindrical piece, so I could easily just go in here and say, could do a bridge connected polys, maybe like so. And that works. Alright, so okay, so now I want to get into something that I mentioned to you guys about the division watch and doing some rotational parts. Let me see if I can, and I'll just do a quick demonstration. So this is another really cool thing about ArrayMesh with Booleans, specifically with cylindrical stuff. So I'm going to just start with a basic cylinder here, and if you're doing this method, there's a difference between the triangulated poles cylinder and the insert mesh, like the primitives cylinder that might be a poly, or rather this version in here. So the Q cylinder X, Y, and Z. You see that that's quadded, right? So the smoothing is not going to be a perfect, if I crease polygroups, it's not going to be perfect always, depending on the resolution and all of that. So this is why, especially for this kind of stuff, I stick to just a basic old-fashioned triangulated pole cylinder. And I should have reduced these, but alright, so I want to make some sort of turret to put on the front of this thing, and I'm going to break this off and work on a separate mesh. So especially anything that's rotating around an object, if you're using radial symmetry or nanomesh and ArrayMesh specifically, it's good to keep this thing centered as much as possible. It'd make things a lot simpler. But I want to go in and maybe start doing some basic details. So I might just make a little detail shapes here, like taper this a little bit. So no floor. Alright, so what I'm going to do here in this case, like I was doing before, kind of starting with just a basic cube or something, just bring in the star maybe, and I can grab one of these initialized cubes like so. So what I'm going to do is start to maybe do some details around this thing or cut some parts out. So I can easily take, a piece like this, for example, maybe bring this out like so. Alright, so this piece, I'm going to hold Alt and click on the home icon, so I'm going to lock the gizmo to the center. Alright, so that's just basically going to the perfect center of ZBrush in this case. And now I'm going to go into my ArrayMesh, and this is where that lock position, lock size, and then let's do, say, repeat like so. Or rather, no, in this case what I want to do is, let's try both. We can go to rotate, bring this guy to the center. So I'll turn transparency on so you can see it. So this method works something like this. You keep, in this case I started wrong. So you start your mesh in the center, keep everything oriented, and we can lock position, lock size, do our repeats. Say I'll just do small, like 10 pieces or so. And I can go into my rotation. So this is now where I want to rotate those repeat parts, which is based on that pivot orientation. So in this case, let's do 360. And then now go into my transpose, turn off the gizmo. I can bring these out and start to, or in this case, you don't have to use the gizmo. I'm mixing up the old method with the new method. So ArrayMesh, I'll start over, just in case anybody. Let's go no ArrayMesh. Make sure that's reset. Put him at the center. Okay, so mesh starts at the center. Go to array. Let's reset it. Lock position and size. Set your number of repeats. And then we can do a rotate of 360. And then now, in this case, you don't have to use gizmo, so you can literally just go and pull this out like so. So I'm just using this as a little array, and I want to go and set up my Boolean, do my subtraction, and do my live Booleans without transpose. So now you got this, but what's really great is now I can go in and I can start to scale this mesh, maybe bring this in. And then let me set this to array. Make this the first one. I might do a few. So I can go ArrayMesh, and then we can start working on this piece. So let's solo this guy out. Do a little Q meshing. Do 1 and 1. Let's take a look and see what this looks like first. Right, but again, kind of going back to that same sort of philosophy of what I was doing with the last stream, and some of this stuff here is just keeping all this stuff unified. And again, with ArrayMesh now around the cylindrical part, I got all these kinds of options that I can maybe go in and scale this up. Yeah, okay. Right, and then, we can maybe take this, duplicate that one, and then this one I'm going to mess around with the shape a lot. Maybe rotate it 90 degrees. That's weird. I don't see my... Oh, there it is. Couldn't find my value. There we go. Okay. So, and then also, right, another really cool thing is I can take the gizmo alt click on the home icon, and I can take this and maybe rotate it around like so. Set those guys to subtract. Maybe move these out just a little bit. So I want those to cut out about there maybe. Alright, a dig. I'm getting somewhere. So then maybe I'll take, this will like be the base plate for this guy, and then I could go in and let's just work on another piece. So this one I'm going to start a new chain. This is going to be like the centralized maybe hub or something. And this is going to be where the cannons might go. Alright, so you can go and do the home icon, change the placement and all that. Maybe get this thing to just do a few more little details. Sweet. Alright, so I got that going. Might need to make this taller so I can do some. Right, and then another cool trick, I totally forgot to mention this one, but if you wanted to wrap this piece, if I wanted to match that cylindrical shape of that piece, I could go in, put my gizmo here at the center of the mesh. We can go do maybe the bend arc. Alright, so we can grab maybe the green cone, start wrapping this a little bit more. Alright, if I want that to fan out better. Alright, we could even bring it out just to match maybe a curve here. So I'm just toggling back and forth with W. Alright, so I'm giving it some sort of reference here to match that curvature. So I know that, you know, if it's sitting about here, it's about right. Alright, then I can maybe go and accept it. I want to make this a little bit taller. And also, I don't like this stepping here. Alright. Let's do like a little, some kind of cannon. Oops, thought that was poly loop. Whoops. Give that a try. We'll see. This is Canon Mod 1. Geez, it's already 5:45. Jeez. Alright, Pro2 said bye. Pixelogic Kyle says at. I don't even know what that means. Alright, so I got like 10 minutes left. Gosh, time flies doing this. For those of you guys that are hanging around, you know, I can keep messing with this stuff all day, but do you guys have any questions or concerns? Anything you guys have, you know, maybe I can show you? Or I think what I want to do here is bring this out, get this rotation to work. Actually, let's try this. So let's say I'll take this one. I'm going to duplicate this one last thing here. Let's take these ones as a subtractive. We'll do those as an add. Alright, so I'm going to save this puppy. We'll get it in there. Oh yeah, I wouldn't retopple this reclusive. There's no way. But one thing that I do love about this is with the Boolean stuff, for example, I can go, let's do solo parts. So Canon mod version 1. Save this guy. Well, I've got my last 10 minutes, right? So I can, let's take Boolean. I don't even know. I do have some dynamics. Let's make this. Alright, so we got those pieces. We got this. Alright, so the great thing about this whole bridge to Keyshot thing is, in this case, because I have these polygroups, right, I could go in and take this piece, for example. Let's just grab my polygroups, group those guys together. Canon head 1. So I just kind of assign major groups to everything. Like, I'm kind of treating this as, I want to get a really nice conceptual design for it. So rendering a Keyshot works perfectly. And I can apply, custom shaders and textures and things there, because their system takes all of our poly counts and everything, right? And so I could easily just take this now and go, let me grab this one too. So I'm going to grow out to all the sections and get rid of this stuff and these guys. Canon base 1. So I'll quick save this guy. Now we can go ahead and just do a group split. A group split here. And let's take a look at this guy. And I'll let that load while it's going in. I wanted to show you guys this. I'm going to post this as soon as this stream is done. But I've got, let's see, where did I put it? 4R8. Division watch. Breakdown tutorial. Aha, okay, here we go. So I think I might have brought this up before, but this whole thing just kind of outlines the basics of what each feature does and where, what settings work best with ArrayMesh and Booleans and getting everything to line up in this way. But it's in depth. It goes through everything that I just did pretty quickly, but it kind of highlights all the basic stuff. So I'm going to post this as soon as I finish the stream. So I kind of went through each um, each major section. So using ArrayMesh also to do these chains, how to set it up, where it needs to be oriented in the center of ZBrush to get it to wrap around like so, to do a watch band, for example. Um, how to rotate the parts to get joints and things to line up as well. So I found a really good workflow for that with Booleans and using ArrayMesh in this way. So I promise I'm going to post that ASAP. I'm going to put that here in ZBrush Central Source Galileo Egg, which I put in the chat at some point. I'll throw it in there again. Oh, nice, Reclusive. Mav3D. You got Keyshot for ZBrush. Have you? How's that been going for you? I'm assuming you tried it out as soon as you bought it. All right, but yeah, what I was kind of mentioning earlier is like because the Boolean's creating those polygroups at those hard edges, you get a perfect edge, and I could go in now. In this case, it makes it really easy if I wanted to go in and just like dump in some basic paint here. Let's go with like what would be a good material for this? Oh, this is where it just gets crazy. First and foremost, let's get a better environment. I definitely don't want glossy for this guy. Alright, but now because these things are separated into groups, that was kind of my point. I'm not going to make you guys watch me go through and assign materials, but separating those into different shells instead of going in, right? Because you could always do the group by materials, assign materials to each subtool or each section, which will allow you to add materials to that section in Keyshot. But for this, when I generate my Booleans, I know my Booleans are exactly the way that I want them to look. So separating all these shells out like so makes it super easy to go in and start applying stuff. And I could, go all day with this. Get some more contrast going. Mav3D, you said everything's set up smooth. You tried Keyshot in the past, but the bridge does make it awesome. And which version did you get? I'm assuming you're on 6 right now. I know 7 has their beta is available, but still in beta. So we can't promise there may not be issues with the bridge to at least on the Mac side, I think is the only issue that we have right now. There's been reports, but it works fine for the Windows. I use it. I've been using it for testing purposes, but I really like it. Paint materials are always the best. Yeah, Janal, this is Keyshot. I'm assuming you haven't used it before? Oh, you know what would be a good opportunity? Um, Mav, I'm assuming, well, you had the trial, you probably gave this a shot. If you've ever checked out the Cloud library, they have some really awesome resources. You can find a lot of pretty cool shaders that their community has put together. If I can remember my password. Yeah, so we can go through and try out some new stuff maybe. Just see what the metal trends are looking like. Maybe try this guy. Login and password again. Gunmetal. Yeah, I'm gonna keep messing with that forever, so I'm gonna let that one be. I'll be prepared for some renders when the time comes. But for any of you guys that didn't see it, I'm gonna keep posting stuff. I'm gonna keep posting updates here. Cert_scallywag, ZBrush Central. I got a couple people in here already, so it'd be great to have tons of people chatting and asking questions. And I'm very happy to take requests for the next stream if you guys want me to focus on anything particular instead of just kind of going over and doing all this. But my goal is to get through all these things, which I think I left off. Let me give you guys a quick update on where I'm at in the practice version, at least. Let's see. Yep, so let's see, live Boolean. Alright, so here's everything so far. Except for, what is that? What is that? Oh, I know what it is. Let's delete this guy. Okay, there we go. I don't know when that happened. Alright, so I got some of this stuff starting to work. I got some extra little details going in here. If I turn on the neck pieces. All these solo parts starting to get some edging. All right, so it's coming along, but everything I showed you guys today is basically just getting all these little array mesh parts set up and getting these frames going. Because once everything is in place, it's going to be really easy to start populating all those little details using these array mesh techniques. So I kind of like to just put it in place and then just start going crazy all over the place. But yeah, Joanna, or wait, Joanner. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate that. Hopefully, I'll see you guys next time. Did I watch Battlestar Galactica? Unfortunately, no. That's one of those. Okay, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I got really into. I used to hate Star Trek, the show. For whatever reason, growing up, I was a Star Wars kid all the way through, and I think it was the Star Trek, especially Next Generation, was out when I was a kid, and I couldn't stand the color palette. But recently, I got into that, and Next Generation, I went through Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, like all the sub series, and I loved it. And I thought afterwards, I used to think the same thing about Battlestar Galactica. So it's on my list now. Would you recommend it as far as the show to watch? Does this ship remind you of something from Battlestar Galactica? Oh yeah, there you go. Kingsley got the link. Sweet. I was just about to copy that. Thanks, Reclusive. Appreciate you chatting. I wish I could hear you guys. It's kind of tough to talk out loud and not hear responses, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. But definitely check out that post. If you have questions, it would be awesome if you guys throw them in there before the next stream, because that way I can prepare and have files ready and can show you guys in depth, and I won't have to spend 20 or 30 minutes of the stream to go into it. But I'm more than happy to. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you staying all the way through. All 51 of you are still here. um, well, I'm just gonna keep fiddling with this. I think I'm gonna have to close it out here in a second. Yeah. So check out the link Kingsley just posted. I'll be there for the rest of the next few weeks until the next stream. Not sure when the next one's happening, but it's gonna be coming up soon, and I'll have all this stuff prepped. I'm gonna go through and I think generate a lot of the basic stuff that I've been working on here on the bridge, and then start focusing on the rest of the ship with you guys. So I'll check you guys next time. Yeah, 15 loyal subjects. Like, please, I want to get in like a go-to meeting. If I could just hear everybody's voice, that would be so much easier. But I appreciate you guys, keeping the chat going, and looking forward to the next time. I'll call this one quits, but I'll see you guys next stream. Take it easy. Bye.